Yeah, there go. There
Speak
we go.
now or forever hold your peace.
Okay, so yeah, welcome everybody. We talk about moment of depression topic, and with that, what we do, as always, in our Friends of Friends discussion, is we start with a pragmatic scientific point of view, study a little bit on what psychologists have said in past, if there are any conflicting theories around it. This topic also demands a little bit of personal stories, so we hope and we see how it goes ahead. We share some of our own stories or stories from our personal connects. We talk about and try to do a quick activity and exercise with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And in that, thanks to Alessandra, she brought up a third generation topic on CBT, which is called behavioral activation therapy, which is very powerful in my opinion for especially depression. We talk about a mindfulness impulse where maybe I share my personal story and how the all the learnings of mindfulness etc accumulated, or I hope so. Hopefully I didn't fool myself. And then obviously open for discussion across all of it. We try to keep the discussion short, but it never happens. That's why I have given up. Right? So this is like fourth or fifth session. We thought we will start with a 20-minute session, but it always goes around 1 hour, just to give the expectation on timeline. Yeah.
Let's see how it
Let's
goes
see.
this
Let's
week.
see. Yeah. Let's see how it goes this week. So yeah, very quickly, let's jump into the first point already. So Lynn Abramson and others around Lynn's time came up with two explanatory or two descriptive things on what depression could look like and how it is evolved, right? The first phenomenon which they said is a learned helplessness. So there is where an exposure to an uncontrolled event creates a passive behavior in the face of subsequent threats to the well-being of depression. Let me give examples. So there was a study done where a dog was set up with a electrical collar, and if the dog tries to cross a particular boundary, an uncontrolled electrical shock was given, right? um, this was very back in the days when PETA was not too active. I guess it was a wrong thing to do. But
Mhm.
what they found out of that is that after having this done for a lot of time, even when the collar was removed, the dog faced real challenges in trying to cross the boundary. They had a mental block. But you know what? There was equal amount of study done with humans staying in areas where there were uncontrolled impulses of noise, for example. For example, staying near the war zones and having the firing shots done, hearing them round the clock. And that's not something you can control. And it was found that when these humans were faced in another situation where they could have controlled these impulses, or the noise was not that harmful, or they could have shut down the noise, they couldn't even control their emotions at that point in time, right? And even in the situations where the well-being could be achieved, they were still facing those symptoms of depression. What this theory is trying to talk about is a learned helplessness, that
Mhm.
being exposed to an uncontrolled situation. In my life, I'm depressed for XYZ reason. I am not having it in my control. I am completely helpless. And I've learned it for a couple of elongated period. And then when I step into a similar situation when I can actually control it, because of my learned helplessness, I still go into my
Mhm.
episodes of depression because that's how my mind is now conditioned, right? A very powerful, in my personal opinion and experience, a very powerful phenomenon, where you see somebody getting depressed on smaller issues, somebody just stepping into hospital and completely breaking down, right? Whereas we can tell them, hey, there's nothing wrong here, it's something very small, you could walk out. No, but there would have been a learned helplessness episode in the past, right? On that. The second part, when the study evolved, there was something that came up with a is called as an explanatory style. So a habitual tendency to attribute negative events around three major genres, right? Which are like stable, cannot change, which are global in nature, and which are very internal, right? Some of the three examples, very common examples around these explanatory styles are, for example, it's my fault, internal, right? It's always whatever happened, it's my fault, I am wrong, I cannot do this, it has to be me, I was good at this, now I'm not, I can't even deliver so much of work that was asked for me, so it's my fault. Internalizing rather than looking at external things. Stable rather than unstable. It will not change. This will be my life forever. This is how it's going to remain forever, right? So stabilizing mindset over unstabilizing approach that no, everything changes. This will pass, right? And global rather than specific. It's not my office problem. No, this is everywhere. This is how world works. This is how humans are, for that matter. This is how Earth is, right? So making it global rather than specific instance based approach, these explanatory styles within ourselves, and if you observe in other, are very prone to go into depressive states. There was a study done where the university students were tracked, and in the first year, they caught the number of students who were not depressed. They did not have any depression signs, and they divided the group into two parts. One who are having the depressive explanatory styles, like internal, stable, and global, versus people who are a little more specific, talk about no, everything is unstable, things change, versus externalizing things. And they found after a few years that people who had depressive explanatory styles of thinking and talking were way more prone, and they fell for depressive syndromes over the people who did not have that depressive explanatory styles, right? So much so that I don't remember the graph now, but maybe 80 to 90% more people fell into actual depressive cases and signs who had this kind of thinking process and mental mindset. So think about it, step back, think about it. How many of these do you actually have, right? I mean, today in COVID-19 spaces, when you see some people being careless and you saying, oh, you know what, then it's same everywhere. This is how humans are. It cannot change, right? These are some of the things where maybe we ourselves are having depressive explanatory styles. Yeah. Any thoughts on this before I move ahead? Any personal experience, anything that you have observed, anything that you think, no, it's conflicting?
So, Jemin, one thing that I've seen, for example, even, and this is more from movies as an example, but I thought I will just share this. The dog incident is also similar to a story of, the baby of an elephant or a calf, being, nailed to a chain or a keg, as a child, and even when it grows out to be a big tusker, that mindset is that it cannot pull away from the chain, right? So, the example I would like to give is now people, especially living in countries that are torn apart by war, right? And there are constant bombings and shellings going on, right? While they know for sure that they could probably get killed if they go, there is lot of time people who still manage to sneak and develop a sort of maybe thick skin. So why is that? Is it more in terms of not having an alternate choice, or is it more that I know that there is a risk of stepping out, but I'd rather still take chances of staying alive because I know I can still get out of it, kind of a feeling. How does that fall into this?
So, I mean, last time we discussed the fight or flight syndrome around aggression topics, and that is where we were trying to define what is good aggressive behavior approaches or what is bad, right? I think, in my opinion, this turns out to be a fight or flight syndrome where it's innate to all the human beings, has been a primitive strategy thing within us, right? As we discussed, Alessandra, last time. I think there is a point where the fight or flight really kicks in. And once the fight kicks in, it's just the chemical override in your brain. It just bypasses your logical brain seemingly. And Dr. Gitanjali can give more views on how it happens. But there are times when your logical brain is just bypassed to a very instinctive brain, and then it is fight or flight. So you have to run away, and you can do anything which you would have never imagined, right? And it's acts of pure courage, you may like to say it, and things like that. But those are the things that get kicked in, I think, neurologically. And then there is enough and more science around which neurobridges get reset and which part of the brain is just bypassed completely because your decisions have to be faster. You can't think logical. It's not allowed at that point in time to think logical, for example. I think that's the science behind it. But doctor, any insights on this?
Well, from what I have I've studied and I've experienced, and what this one says is that primarily this, especially the depressive explanatory style, that sort of thinking comes from the nurturing aspect, where the child or the individual is in an environment in a very young age, when the influential adults around him or her give him or her certain messages with respect to how he is or how she is. Like, you are always late. You never make your bed. You know, this sort of message building inside the individual, it forms a part of their personality and carries them through adulthood, where if anything happens, for example, if they do not attend a meeting and they do not get a spot because they were late, he's like, oh my God, I'm always like this. You know, the self-talk changes. And when the self-talk changes, I'm like, why do I even bother? I'm always like this. You know, and that's where the depression starts. I'm like, why am I there on earth? You know, it progresses like that, and it may end up in suicidal tendencies. So primarily, I believe that the messages the individual got, what we call as injunctions and life script, that happens in a very young age, that is very important with respect to, of course, there is definitely neurological, organic reasons, and, you know, lots of other reasons as well. But I believe the nurturing portion of it, the growth, where the environment in which the child is growing up, that plays a lot of huge percentage, depends on that, is what I feel.
I mean, thank you. I mean, I just got goosebumps, right? I think today's discussion is going to be something for me. You know, I was, for my daughter, for example, right? And looking at this explanatory style, it's such a revelation to me, right? For example, if I try to impact on her anything which is global rather than specific, or stable rather than unstable, and it could be such a innocent aspect that I'm trying to tell her that, oh, you know what, if you can't exercise, you're going to fall ill.
Right.
Or something like that. And if that goes in my daughter as a stable thing rather than unstable, I am putting a path for her to go on a depressive explanatory style and potential depression. A simple act like that, right? I mean, and that's why I got goosebumps while I was saying, right? That's something.
And especially what I know is that the age from in utero right up to the 7 years of age, 7 to 8 years of age, are actually very important with respect to life script being developed. This is what psychology says, that it's very, very important the first 7 years to 8 years of life. So I was very surprised when I heard that, because according to me, first 7 to 8 years of life is just they're building their individuality. They won't know anything. They've not come into their consciousness. And that was what I believe. But when I read about this, I was extremely surprised. First 7 years can kind of lay the foundation for what you think about yourself for the rest of your life. So that's something very, very powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, doctor. Thank you for sharing that. Any other comments from
Jemin, just one more clarification or thought. You know, in terms of this learned helplessness, right? As an example, could it also lead to behavior that might be very aggressive? It could be that behavior of, let's say, the dog unable to cross the fence that is electrocuted, or like in the movies you see, right? There is a villain kind of, coming and beating up a whole village black and blue. And people are helpless, right? Because they know probably they could get killed. So will this actually build up a certain amount of aggression in an individual, which may finally vent out in some other place which is completely unrelated from the event that caused it?
Yes. There was one very interesting image, and Alessandra, if you have it, if you can pull it, we can share it with the group. Last week we had shared a very nice image on this, right? That there are layers of emotions that a person does, and there was a very nice cartoon graphic. I'll try and share it. It was there in the last session, that that vulnerability or depression or pain was hidden by tears, was hidden by anger, was hidden by apathy, right? So there are multiple layers. So maybe somebody who's really angry, really violent, is actually just a small kid crying inside somewhere, right? So yes, there are different phases that emotions come out with. And I've observed this even in corporate world, to be very honest with you, right? Across this many years, there are the people who are really aggressive, trying to not help you, trying to be fenced, very strong, etc. Most of the times it's not that they are mean or something. They are just insecure. They're just insecure, nothing else, right? And if you look at it from that point of view, you would like to help them rather than feel bad or fight with them, to be honest. But KL, we will try, and as soon as we get that, we'll share that in between of the session. But there is a very nice cartoon representation of this which we had. But you are right, KL. There are different phases that this learned helplessness can eventually evolve. But at the root of it is nothing but a depression, right?
Yes.
Very powerful.
And another thing that that comes to mind when I see all this learned helplessness and the explanatory style and the depressive explanatory style are abusive situations.
Yes. Uncontrolled event again, right? You can't control the abusive situation. Then
whether it's child abuse or partner abuse.
Yes.
But especially for children, being so dependent upon their parents for everything, they always tend to blame themselves. I'm a bad kid. It's my fault. And all that leads to this feeling of insecurity and worthlessness that eventually leads to all this depression.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, I think so. Piyush, Pilar, any comments on this before we move to the next point?
Well, as you know, I come from war refugees, and I mean, grandparents and parents really went through hell. Seeing their friends killed, my grandpa in the concentration camp. I mean, it was something huge, and I was thinking about how can they deal with what they had to go through, and how did they manage their depressions. And some of them, I'm going to talk specifically about my grandfather's house. He was in the concentration camp. After that, he was quiet, he was diligent, he minded his business. He was a very serious man, but even though he was broken, he managed to go on with his wife and his daughters. He made it through. But his brother, who didn't go to the war, who was hiding in the mountains, who was doing whatever, became a permanent drifter. And he was always depressed and always asking for money and boohoo boohoo, and a lot of shame and a lot of things. And I don't know if it was because of his daughters that my grandfather decided to do whatever he had to do. But the one who was hiding, he never married, he never did anything. He just drifted, and he was in this learned helplessness, and everything was a problem, and the world owed him everything, and it was very strange. And even though I do recognize depression in both men, in a very different way, because the third brother went crazy. He ended up in an asylum. He had to shoot a man in the face, and he went crazy. He ended in an asylum. He couldn't do more, and it's so huge.
Yeah.
What happens and how you react and how you block things and how you feel contained by something, this invisible force that doesn't allow you to move on somehow. So I am lost in all these thoughts in the family's traumas, which are plenty, and both mom and dad side, but will come another day.
Yeah. Thank you, Pila.
So I mean, listening to all the stories, I could actually connect dots between a lot of stories that I've heard across my life. I mean, this is that insightful. For example, as you mentioned, there are people who just go to hospital and they break down. There are people I know who just watch the movies where there are hospital scenes involved and they couldn't watch the movie, for that example. And then there are other cases of partner abuse. There are other cases of failed marriages in which the other partner doesn't get the custody of the children and they go deep down into the depression because of that. So other things are children who see abuses at home and other things, and they kind of build this long-term depression kind of thing, which they never are able to get out of. So I'm really able to connect the dots between these stories, and I see, I mean, how this is actually all connected.